Waiters of Reddit, what messed up shit have you overheard while waiting tables? NSFW. Oh god, I forgot this one. I was waiting on a table of a big family. 7 of them, 3 kids, mom and dad, and grandma and grandpa. Grandma was your typical old grandma. In a wheelchair with a blanket over her legs, looked like one of those Apple dolls, spoke in a whisper. She sees my tattoos, grabs me with her bony hand, and says, "You know dear, I have a tattoo too." And her husband says, "Grace, leave her alone. She's working." I'm curious, I'm nosy, so I say, "Oh really? Of what?" Grandpa rolls his eyes and goes, "Here we go." Grandma says it's a tiny, little mouse using the best of her ancient breath to get the words out. "Would you like to see it?" Hell yeah, I wanna see a 90-year-old's tattoo. She goes, "It's on my hip." Hold on, and pulls her blanket off and then starts trying to pull her skirt down. Her old lady flesh is totally exposed to the sun. We were on a patio and I'm using menus to try to shield her. I was that worried it would just burst to flames or something. She keeps pulling at her clothes going, "Now where is it? Where is it?" Getting dangerously close to seeing old lady pubes now. Finally she looks up at me and say, "Well, you know what? It's gone. I bet my pussy ate it." This was actually just last night. I work at a semi-formal restaurant and 2 people in their early 30s came in. Neither of them seemed too excited to be with the other. I asked if tonight was a special occasion, and they said it was their first date. So they order some wine and gnocchi. These had to be the 2 most blunt people I've ever heard speak. The first thing I heard the woman ask was, "What do you do for a living? Does that make good money?" The guy didn't seem turned off at all. In fact, after answering, he asked, "My parents have been all over me to give them grandkids. Do you think you'll be able to give them any?" The date continued, and they talked about more and more uncomfortable shit. And they seemed to fucking really like each other. So at the end of the meal I come over with the bill and ask, "So are we going to be seeing you 2 again?" The guy says possibly, and tells me to split the check. They leave holding hands. They literally broke every first date rule and it worked. He probably went home and fucked her in the ass and then gave her a key to his house. Weirdos. One time, there was this 5 or 6-year-old boy who wouldn't stop talking about baseball. He was so excited and happy talking about all the players and how he was going to make it one day. Then his grandmother turned to him and said, "Honey, stop. You're never going to be a baseball player or play with the pros, so just stop." The boy just stopped and went silent. He was quiet and looking at the table the rest of his meal. The kid was not obese or anything like that. He's a fucking kid. Let him dream, bitch. I waited table/tended bar in the late 80s, the Village in Coconut Grove FL, after college. 2 ladies sat down at a table in my section. I greeted them and got them water. A man showed up and instantly turned pale. Turns out it was his wife and his girlfriend, and they had found about each other and set him up. He had his head in his hands the whole time. I didn't hear a lot of what they were saying, but the pieces I did hear were unpleasant. There was this group of 4 elderly women who would come into my family's restaurant once a month. One month, one of them came by herself. I asked, "Hi Edith, where are all of your friends? They all died." And she broke into tears. I felt like shit the rest of the night. Adorable little boy and his mom. I was chatting up the kid and thinking I'm going to get a nice tip. As I walk away, the mother says, "Son, what have I told you about talking to the help?" I was 20 and in college at the time and had never felt as much like garbage as I did at that moment. Ruined my whole day. Oh yeah, the bitch didn't tip. I've worked in restaurants my entire life. Fine dining, casual dining, a diner. No matter what type of establishment, you always hear a lot of messed up stuff. At the diner, I would frequently serve a woman and her somewhat obese 16 to 17-year-old daughter. The mother was always fairly pleasant with a bit of a bitchy air about her. I can still vividly recall the one time the daughter asked for a burger with bacon and cheese and onion rings on the side. I said sure, no problem. Ask the mother what she would like. She looks at me, and I wish I was kidding, and said to not have such a disgusting pig of a daughter. I was shocked, looked at her for a second, then said, I'll give you a few more minutes." Then she looks me straight in the eyes and says, "No, seriously, get her a salad. You can't look at her and say she's a beautiful girl." She's fat and disgusting, and at this point I'm embarrassed to even be seen with her. Would you date her? At that point the girl burst into tears, stood up, and ran out the restaurant. The mother made a disgusted sigh and followed after her. Never saw them again. Fine dining is another end of the spectrum. You will frequently hear lots of crazy shit, usually about hookers, blow, and money. Some choice quotes. So we had 3 hookers there. The one bitch passed out sucking gym sticks, so we took turns fucking her, while the other 2 begged us not to. We threw them $1,000, told them to shut up and do their job, and had each one licking her nipples while we kept fucking her. So we were looking at vacation homes, and the woman actually took us to a couple of different places that didn't have stainless steel in the kitchen. I asked her to call her boss right then and there. She did, and when she passed me the phone I had her fired on the spot immediately. Seriously, not stainless steel? I would have done the same. That's disgusting. That's what I like about Canada. They don't have any dirty Mexicans serving people at the table. Look at this nice young man. You can tell he doesn't have an ounce of filthy Mexican or black blood in him. Excuse me. What is your background? Me. Very uncomfortable. UHH. Well, my family has lived in Canada for 3 generations including me, but German, Irish and Scottish see, not even an ounce of filthy N******er blood in him. He's pure. They were Southern American tourists. After serving a very pregnant woman 2 glasses of wine, she orders another glass and a double scotch. I'm very sorry, I'm actually not comfortable serving you any more alcohol. Get me your manager. You can't fucking tell me what I can or can't do. I didn't even want this fucking thing. Points to her stomach. So I can treat it however the fuck I want. I spoke to my manager. We had her removed from the restaurant. I'm sure I have a ton more, if I really think of it, but those are some of the more horrible ones. The only thing I can say is there are a lot of dicks in this world, but the good people far outnumber them. You hear this shit few and far between. But yeah, you hear a lot of fucked up shit working as a server. 2 guys sitting at my bar top, looking shady as fuck, decided they were going to scout for the ladies. Now if you've worked in a continuously loud environment, you know that people will say anything when they think you can't hear them. Man, that was fucking stupid. What about the blonde with the blue dress? Nah, I was thinking of that one. He pointed to a smaller, more fragile looking brunette sitting by herself. They get quiet for a bit before the first guy asks, "Are you sure you wanna do this?" The second guy, "That's what she gets for dressing like a whore. Let's hope she parked in the back." I said fuck that and called the police. They were asked to leave, and one of the officers offered to follow the girl home. St. Patrick's Day, working at a pretty busy bar in San Diego, waiting on a table of fraternity guys from STSU. No big deal. I take the order and notice something is seriously off with one of the guys. Not like he is hammered, but was pulling a face like really shocked/disgusted. Bar was crowded and noisy, so his bros did not notice it, but I walked up by him and was like, "You okay, bruh?" He looked at me pale as a ghost and said, "I just shit my pants. It is everywhere. It is in my shoes." Now as a man who has been there, I felt I had to help out. I also worked security at this place, so grabbed the attention of one of the big Tongan bouncers. Took the bouncer aside, and if you don't know this, Tongans are some of the most helpful people around, and told him the dealers I'm starting to smell and see shit. Next thing I know, the 3 big Tongan doormen come out of nowhere and muscle this guy out, just saying the usual, "Sorry guys, but your friend has to go." They took him in the back and already had a clean pair of boxers and jeans for the guy and let him clean up in the staff bathroom, and one of them actually gave him a ride home. I was busy and did not see him leave, but got a cool note from their fraternity the next day and a honorary sweatshirt and a gift certificate to Best Buy. I have it somewhere. He got to save face with the girls they were with, and they were all regulars after that, and tipped really well. I once waited on a couple that broke up while I was waiting on them. They came separately. The wife showed up first. She was very chipper and friendly, and I grabbed her a water while she was waiting on her husband. The husband showed up like 10 minutes later. When I went to the table to grab his drink, I could hear her saying, "What's wrong? What's your deal? Just talk to me." While I was waiting at the bar for his drink, one of the hosts ran up to me and said, "Hey, I think your table is breaking up." I look up to the corner where they are sitting, and the wife is sobbing. Now what do I do? I have to bring him his drink, even though surely they aren't going to stay and eat now, right? Wrong. I brought him his drink when I set it down in front of him, expecting him to tell me thanks, but no thank, we are leaving. He says, do you know what you want? Through her tears she says yes and orders. WTF, I have to wait on these people now. I then have one of the most awkward tables of my life, having to keep up my peppy attitude and fake smiles while this poor woman's life is crashing down. When it was all over and I set the bill down in front of the husband, I figure he would at least be kind enough to pay the bill. Alas, he pushed it back to me and said, can you separate this, please? It was the last table of my last shift of my last day at this place. Two top, man and a woman, both pretty attractive and looking extremely happy to be out on a date together. The meal goes smoothly. They ask for the check. I bring it. Upon returning to grab their credit card, I ask if they'd like me to box up their leftovers. He says sure, and just as I'm leaning in to grab her plate of pasta, she looks him dead in the eye while holding his hand and says, I'm pregnant. I freeze a bit, then silently carry their plate back to the kitchen. I was so shocked that I went on autopilot mode and threw their leftovers away. The guy was not very hungry after that, though. I don't really wait tables, but I do scoop ice cream and bring it out to customers. Anyway, we have a regular who we all assume fought in Vietnam. He looks as if he fits in the age group and is always wearing camo pants and jacket. Not to mention he's referenced the war a few times. The whole point is, we can tell he's not quite right in the head, and we assume it's because of his participation in Vietnam. One day as I go to bring him his ice cream, this was his second time that day, I jokingly tell him twice in one day, I know our ice cream's good, but it can't be that good, right? And just out of nowhere, he replies, well, it helps keep the suicidal thoughts away. I then refunded his money and told him how much life was worth living. After that, whenever I see him, I make sure to talk to him for longer than a normal conversation would go. I know this may sound really cheesy, but I hope he knows he's got at least one friend. I waited tables at the Olive Garden 10 years ago. Not really fucked up as much as it was funny. A guy and his wife sat down at a table and immediately started arguing. Something about his affair and how a baby from it was costing them money. Finally it culminated as I was bringing out their salad. As I walked away I heard the wife say, well, maybe if you hadn't boned our son's girlfriend and gotten her pregnant, we could afford to eat somewhere nicer than the fucking Olive Garden. Oh look, the highlight of my meals, unlimited fucking bagged salad. Maybe you could save up and we could go to Joe's Crab Shack for our anniversary. Arsehole. Waffle House waitress for 4 years in high school. I saw and heard so much shit. I honestly got used to old truckers asking me if I wanted to make an extra tip in the parking lot at the grand old age of 16. But the one time I literally had to say what the fuck, I didn't even understand the conversation. Two Latino couples were sharing a booth and seemed to be having a good time. I don't speak Spanish, but nothing in their tone made it seem unusual. Out of nowhere one of the husbands grabs his wife by the back of her hair, slams her face into the table, and just goes about his conversation. He didn't even look at her. She wiped her face off and just went back to talking and listening. No one batted an eye at the table. I delivered their food a few minutes later and all four of them seemed like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I've called out dozens of customers in my day. You can say whatever the hell you want as a WF waitress. Not exactly a classy joint, but I had no idea how to respond that scenario. People often don't realize that when you're sitting at the bartenders hear everything. Sometimes I talk with guests, but sometimes people have really intense and private conversations like less than a meter away from me. I'll just keep my head down and rinse glasses and pour drinks and basically pretend I'm really busy. Just yesterday there were two guys in their early 20s talking about how their girlfriends were total cunts who nagged and bitched all the time. They drank a lot of tequila and whiskey, and at one point one guy said to the other, "You should just sleep at my place. You can't drive like this." The other disagreed, and they got in a drunken argument, and at one point the guy who suggested the sleepover just grabbed the other guy's face and said, "Fuck you," and then they just started making out. Just out of the blue, sloppy, and drunk, making out. It was weird and hilarious. mostly overseen rather than overheard, but this is one of my favorites from the bar I work at. So I work at a neighborhood bar in a nice area of a big city. Sports bar, lots of regulars, mostly successful people in their late 20s to mid 30s. There is one couple that comes in about 3 times a week. They were planning their wedding at the time, and it was about 6 months before the big day when they came in for a drink. About 2 hours after they left, the guy comes back in completely hammered with another guy. They are talking very close to one another, and we can kind of hear him telling the other guy that he was going to leave his fiancée for him, but it was all slurred together, so I don't know exactly what was said. Then they start making out at the bar on a slow Tuesday. He came in 2 days later with his fiancée like nothing happened, so I'm assuming he doesn't remember. I hadn't seen them in a while, but they turned up a few months ago for bingo night and to celebrate their 1-month wedding anniversary. Not really fucked up, but just a complete lack of understanding from a privileged person. I worked at a popular restaurant chain while in college. This was about 7 years ago. The owners of one of the largest beer breweries in the country came in to eat. I'd prefer to not say the name as I'm a fan of their product and promotional/charity participation. Anyway, they are sitting there eating, and the wife says to the husband, "I don't understand what you mean by living paycheck to paycheck." He explains to her what living paycheck to paycheck actually means in a very respectful and unbiased fashion. She still doesn't get it. She questions why these people don't have any money left over after they pay their bills, and why they don't just change that, or why their bills are so high, or why they don't just make more money. They were out to eat with another couple who also tried explaining this to her. A solid 10 minutes was spent on trying to educate this woman on the fact that most people don't live like she is used to. All of them sort of gave up trying when they realized she just didn't get it. You could literally see the confusion on her face. It gave me a new perspective on things.